I'm Bill Pemberton.
And I'm Katie Fitz. Welcome to Prime.
And today we're going to introduce you to two people who are making a big difference in our community. Our first guest is Pamela Sybert, who's Director of Educational Consortium for Volunteerism at the University of North Texas in Denton. Pam's special job is to promote volunteerism in the state of Texas and to train young people to become professional managers of volunteers. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you, Bill and Katie.
Well, that's a mighty long title you have there. Did I do it justice?
You did very well. It is a mouthful. I appreciate it.
Well, good. Well, now I understand that the work that you do is primarily done or exclusively done through the University of North Texas, and I believe through the College of Public Affairs and Community Service, often called PACS.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, good. Well, could you tell us a little bit about the overall mission of PACS?
I would love to, because it's a very unusual college, and the mission of PACS is to strengthen communities through research, education, and community engagement.
Wow.
So community engagement is right in our mission statement. And we have a lot of applied degrees teaching young people how to work with persons with disabilities, older adults to be city managers, those sorts of things. So it's a very applied college.
Okay.
Interesting.
So your job is really about training people to manage their volunteers effectively? Is that right?
That's absolutely
Okay.
true. When you think about it, nonprofit organizations depend heavily on volunteers. And the more effectively and efficiently those volunteers are managed, the better services for clients and customers all over the state, really.
So then where did your passion for volunteerism come from, Pamela?
Well, growing up, I was very involved, you know, in school and in church and in organizations, and that sort of stuck with me. But one of my degrees is in applied gerontology, helping older adults stay in the community longer through the help of volunteers. So that kind of drives my passion. And then, of course, working with students. Today's students are very interested in giving back to their community, and that's really what our college is about.
That's fascinating. You know, the fact that you actually are about developing the profession or professional volunteer managers, which almost seems like a contradiction in terms, it leads me to think there's a lot of things that volunteers can do beyond what we normally think of as a volunteer, you know, doing clerical work or you know, just around the office. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about all the different ways that volunteers can factor into an organization.
Absolutely. Well, most of us can think about volunteers giving direct service to the clients, whether that's building homes or tutoring kids or, you know, a variety of things like that. But we also ask organizations to really think about how they can use volunteers throughout the organization for fundraising, and many organizations will understand that, but there are additional roles, serving on boards and committees, having volunteers be your speakers bureau. No one can recruit volunteers better than a volunteer in your organization, talking to people and what it really means to them and what the organization is like. Assisting staff in a variety of ways, and particularly with technical assistance as well. We all know how important that is today. But volunteers can help build databases, do social networking sites, update the website. I mean, just many, many things like that. So we ask organizations to think through how can we use volunteers of all ages and all types throughout our entire organization.
Okay, so what are some other reasons that organizations should use volunteers besides those?
Well, that's an excellent question. And a lot of the research shows that many times clients feel better being served by a volunteer. And one of the reasons is because they feel that volunteers are there because they want to be there. They're not just collecting a paycheck. So that's very important. Also, volunteers can expand your contacts in the organization. A person comes into your organization, they don't just come in by themselves. They may literally come in, but think about their family, their friends, their workplace, their places of business that they support. Volunteers expand the contact. And another thing that volunteers do, many times they can see how to do things better. You know, we may have been doing things a certain way for a long time. A volunteer will come in and after a while say, well, why did we do it like that? Wouldn't it be better if we did this? And also, because they are less stressed out, they're not there all the time, they're perfect for special projects, think tanks, pilot projects, things like that. So there are many reasons, but those are just a couple of them.
Well, wow, that makes a lot of sense. You know, one of the things that's always been of interest to me is personal motivation. And what you've just outlined is an enormous range of resources and opportunities for an organization. I guess it behooves every organization to understand a little bit better, why do people volunteer? What are some of the basic reasons that get people off the couch and out there volunteering, giving away their time and their resources?
Well, it's a fascinating question, and we actually ask people why they volunteer, and there are surveys that do that as well. And over the years, I've kind of put them in 4 different categories, if you will. But one I would call social. We're social animals, of course, and so just to be around other people doing things. Perhaps I'm new in town, perhaps I'm single, perhaps I'm lonely. I mean, there can be a million reasons, but volunteering mainly for social reasons. Another category that I kind of call values or beliefs, you'll hear people say things like, I just want to make a difference in my community. My family has always given back. That's just who we are. Those sorts of things. Or they may be passionate about a particular cause, something that may have affected their family or someone they know. Another category is skills. I call it skills. To learn new skills. Volunteering is a wonderful way to learn new skills, or to use old skills in new ways.
Absolutely.
When students say, I want to be a veterinarian or something, I say, well, go volunteer in a vet's office. You know, that will help you decide what you want to do.
Absolutely.
You can try out professions. And then a 4th category in the literature is called voluntols, T-O-L-D-S.
Right.
Someone told you to volunteer.
Right.
And if you think about it, our criminal justice system sometimes mandates people to volunteer. So mandated volunteering is a little strange concept to wrap your head around.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, but that, and then also many colleges and high school classes and organizations require that their members volunteer. So that as well. So for social reasons, for values, to learn new skills and use skills, and because someone told you to volunteer. And I guess I would just point out that those things can bleed over into each other.
Right.
They're not mutually exclusive, but.
Well, I think those are all great reasons, and the one that really resonates with me is what a great way to get out there and build your resume. At any point in life, young person, midlife transition and career, get out there, do something for somebody, put it on your resume. Now you've got experience, which is so important.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, those are a lot of great reasons. Another thing I'd be curious about is the flow of volunteers that you train or that you see with other organizations, is it a fairly steady type of resource, or does it come in ebbs and flows in terms of people's willingness to serve an organization?
Right. Well, interestingly enough, nationally, the rate of volunteerism stays about the same. But, of course, volunteering doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so it follows the trends in society. And 30, 40 years ago, when women went into the workforce in large numbers, that left a huge gap. You know, what we call the June cleavers were no longer there to volunteer during the day.
Anymore, right?
But another example of, following the trends is, for instance, Americans are working longer and longer hours. Well, it stands to reason that if Americans are working longer hours, then they have less time to volunteer. So what can an astute volunteer manager do to counter or embrace that trend, as it were? So you can think about family volunteering. How can we get the whole family to come out and you're spending time with your family, but at the same time you are modeling good behavior, you're helping other people? What about virtual volunteer opportunities? People volunteer via their computer and never leave their office or their house. Having organizations being open on evenings and weekends, taking volunteer jobs and breaking them down into smaller jobs so people can run in and volunteer quickly. So all of those kinds of things, you can see what volunteer managers have to think about for their programs.
So you've mentioned several different ways that people do volunteer, but what types of people volunteer?
Right. Well, all types, of course, but I think we're going to look a little bit about the national figures. 63 million people volunteer in the United States, and that's about 26% of the population. They volunteer about 8 billion hours a year, which is pretty incredible, and saving our economy about $173 billion. And the top, it's quite impressive, really, when you think about that. And some of the top roles for volunteers, and these are in order, is fundraising, for organizations, you know, doing special events, the fun runs, all of those sorts of things. Collecting and distributing food would be second. General labor, and that could be carpentry or, you know, lots of different things. And the last one, tutoring and teaching. And you might find this interesting too. The top 3 places where people volunteer. First are religious organizations. Second are educational programs. And last is social services encompassing a, you know, a broad variety of organizations.
Okay, well, what type of program does UNT have that trains these managers?
Right. We have several, but one of two, I'll talk particularly about 2 of our top programs. One is we developed the first in the nation online academic certificate for volunteer and community resource managers. That's 4 college courses. But we also have short and very innovative continuing education, and those are also online. So those are 2 of the main things that we do.
Well, that's fascinating. I guess we would want to know, how can our viewers out there that are interested in being a part of this or learning more or getting into your training programs, how could they find out more about you, and where would they go to learn more about what you do?
Certainly our website, and contacting me directly. I can give you my email and my phone number, but my phone number I think is on the screen, and there's the website, and would love to hear from your viewers.
Well, that sounds amazing. You know, before we wrap up here, and we've got about 2 minutes, I want to just find out, maybe you could share a little bit with our viewers, what are some of the common mistakes that happen out there that people are making with managing volunteers and don't know they're making them because they haven't had training?
Well, absolutely. I would say maybe one of the worst things, you know, is to run out and recruit volunteers before you've really thought through how you're going to use them. And there's nothing worse than wasting people's time. They get there and you're not expecting them, you don't have a place for them, you don't know who's going to supervise them, you don't have a job description. All of those things are big turnoffs. And the number 1 reason why people leave volunteer positions is because they're poorly managed. So that's one thing, at least. I could go on if you wanted.
No, that makes perfect
please
sense. Well, tell us again, where can we go to learn more? A web address and so forth, contact information, maybe we could put that up for our viewers.
Yes.
How could people learn more and
well, I will say one thing about our college, too. We always welcome the community to come in and help us with our vision. We want it to be a collaborative affair. And so the community informs us, we inform the community, but we're always looking for outside people to come and help us expand that vision of community engagement.
That's awesome. And let's see, have we put up the web address for the organization? There we go. People who want to find out more. Katie, you want to tell us about
it? If you want to find out more about what Pamela does, you can visit her website. It's www.ecv.unt.edu. or call 940-565-4417.
Well, thank you so much for coming, Pamela. That was fascinating, and we look forward to having you back.
Well, thank you very much.
You bet. When we come back, you'll meet another person who's making a difference in our community. Stephen Birch tells us how the Sky King Foundation is changing lives. We'll be right back.
Isn't this a beautiful day for flying?
Sure is.
Seems like there's no one in the whole wide world except you and me and that little old car down there. you do?
There's nowhere to land down there. The closest place is the Pineville logging camp. That's over the next ridge.
Hurry, Sky, please hurry.
Welcome back to Prime.
Wow, did that footage of Sky King bring back memories? I'm just old enough to remember when that was on television. It was a fascinating story about a man who flew down out of the sky and did special things for people and saved lives and made a difference. And interestingly, we have another Sky King with us today along those very same lines. Katie,
And
tell us about it.
today we are featuring organizations that have really made a difference in our community, and we have Sky King with us, the Sky King Foundation.
Right. Well, among other things, Sky King flies charitable missions for patients who live in rural areas and so often have a difficult time making it to their physicians, particularly in a timely way. So we have Stephen Birch with us here today to tell us about how Sky King is making a difference in changing lives. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit more about the Sky King Foundation.
Well, as you mentioned, we provide no-cost air transportation for people in rural areas to get back to healthcare centers. The majority of our flying actually involves cancer patients, so they are receiving specialized care that they would not be able to in their natural rural environment. So we go to the local airport and pick them up and take them to a healthcare center.
Interesting. You know, as I mentioned, looking at the early footage, I think Sky King is a perfect name for your foundation. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you particularly in person chose that name? And I understand you actually own some usage rights to the original TV show and even might be able to tell us a little bit about that show and your connection to it.
Well, sure, that's absolutely correct. It has a personal meaning for me. When I was growing up, my mom always called me Sky King. I was always fascinated with aviation. I loved being around airplanes.
Wow.
My uncle had an aircraft and flew in with him quite a few times. And so I always had a passion for aviation. And then when I was old enough, I was able to get my pilot's license very early in life before I got my driver's license. And so the name just kind of stuck. And so that developed into an aviation business, and which created the foundation endowment to keep our work going hopefully in perpetuity.
Fascinating.
So the TV show, though, certainly that's where my mom got the original nickname for me. That she was a fan of the show, and that was started out as a radio program in the 40s, and then transitioned into a TV show in the 50s. And I am a student of history and certainly enjoy all of those elements, and really thought it was important to preserve that aspect of aviation because it does promote aviation as a general industry. And so I had the opportunity to pick up some of the rights for the trademarks as well as the TV shows. And I took that opportunity, and hopefully we'll do some fun things with it in the future as well.
Good.
That's amazing. So, Stephen, tell us, how does it feel when you're flying on one of these missions? What does it feel like?
Well, since I do quite a bit of the flying myself as well to help give back, the feeling obviously as a volunteer is quite rewarding. These are folks that, quite frankly, are on their last opportunity to get to this healthcare, this critical healthcare that they need. So they're certainly very grateful for our services. The personal satisfaction that comes from each flight is different. Obviously, each person has their own personal story, and that's what I think is most unique about the volunteer opportunity, is that each one has a story, and you learn about those people. And some you take multiple times. A lot of times we don't take the same people more than once, but you get to know these people on a personal level and hear their stories, and each one is a very compelling story.
That's amazing.
That's fascinating. Well, you know, the basic concept, Stephen, of coming down out of the air and picking someone up and taking them to the hospital sounds very simple, very dramatic. But I'm going to guess there's a lot more to that story and a lot of other organizations that come into play. Maybe you could take a little time here and tell us what are the groups you work with? Maybe there's other groups out there watching today that would say, you know, I'd like to work with them. Tell us a little bit about how Sky King Foundation plays out on the ground, how you connect, and what your geographic focus is at this point.
Of course, yes. Well, basically, Sky King Foundation is a national organization. We have an operational base in Bridgeport, Connecticut, as well as here at Dallas Love Field. And we really rely heavily on other organizations as well. Sky King Foundation is actually a 100% volunteer organization to begin with, so it's obviously having that capability is really, it conveys the passion of everyone.
Absolutely.
But we really rely heavily on other nonprofits that provide logistical support to us. So as an example, Sky King Foundation does not solicit for patients directly. we use what we refer to as clearinghouse organizations that I'm sure are household names for most of your viewers, the Angel Flight of America, Mercy Flight, Grace Flight, Corporate Angel Network. And what they do is they vet the patients, identify the need, and certainly there's a great need out there. And then what we do is, because we're a volunteer organization, we match the volunteer pilots with the aircraft availability of our aircraft and figure out which ones we can fly. And I wish we could fly them all, but obviously, as you know, as a nonprofit, we don't have an unlimited budget. I wish we did, but we don't. So we have to obviously pick and choose. And we take as many as we possibly can, and then we coordinate with the individual patients on that. So it's a very complex process, but we try and make it as seamless and easy as possible for the patients.
Well, you certainly make it sound very easy, and in our brief chat before the show, you were telling me a little bit about your growth plans, and you guys have some ambitious growth plans, and I'm excited about that. Could you outline that for us a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, one of the biggest challenges of nonprofits is the funding mechanism. In 2011, Sky King Foundation had a 23% decrease in donations over the previous year. That model is slowly, the donor-based model is slowly becoming a dinosaur. And we, like many other organizations in the nonprofit field, feel that it's necessary to shift to a more self-sustaining organization. And so the board of directors of Sky King has kind of dictated that we shift directions a little bit and try and find ways to leverage our nonprofit status as well as the assets of the organization and create a self-sustaining organization to where we can sell or do some activities, services that would then go and directly fund our charitable activities. So we're really trying to do that, and along with that is our expansion plans of more aircraft, perhaps another operational base on the West Coast. That brings us a little closer to some more patients than that we could serve as well. So we have ambitious plans, certainly, as all nonprofits do, and it's good to have that big goal that we go after.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, you sound like a pretty busy man, but what other community outreach operations are you involved with?
Yes, well, I've pretty much dedicated my life to nonprofit activities. As I mentioned, Sky King Foundation is a 100% nonprofit, or I'm sorry, 100% volunteer organization, so I don't actually receive a salary for that activity. I do it as the board chairman. But along with that, we have a strong commitment to other aviation nonprofits, and so we're involved in others like Challenge Air for Kids and Friends. I'm on the board of that organization, which is a great organization that provides fly days for physically and handicapped children to give them the experience of flight. And that's a great and rewarding, another very rewarding experience. So I'm on the board of directors as the vice president, actually. And then I'm also involved in the Dallas Opera. I'm on the board of the Dallas Opera and the finance committee of that organization as well. So I try and give back as much as possible and in addition running our organization. So
you're a busy man, Stephen. Well, what are some of the special challenges that you're facing? You're very ambitious. You've outlined some of the challenges in terms of donors. Our speaker in our first part of our show was talking about volunteerism, and it's a huge untapped reservoir out there of people who are wanting to find a place to make a difference like you are. What are some of the challenges you're facing, and how could people fit in and help fit that? Maybe you would still accept donations. Maybe you need bodies, planes. How could people help?
Well, absolutely. I mean, certainly the clearinghouse organizations always are looking for volunteer pilots for that aspect. So if you are a pilot out there and would like to give back, I would strongly encourage you to sign up for one of the Angel Flight, Grace Flight organizations in the clearinghouse. From our point of view, certainly one of our challenges is we're also unique in the fact that we have an educational component to our aspect. And so, as I mentioned, all of our volunteers, the pilots are volunteers. And we tap certain resources for that through flight schools as well as simulator organizations that teach other pilots. And so we call that kind of the circle of life of education, where we provide some real life experience and they then take that back into the simulator and provide that to their students. So we try and do that quite a bit. But as we all do, all organizations need more volunteers, and certainly we have needs for that as well. We have a lot of projects going on. As you know, we're working through a whole rebranding process of our organization to try and make our messaging a little more concise and special, and certainly that requires outside resources, and so we rely heavily on volunteers for that aspect.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and You know, I personally could think of very few things I think that would be as rewarding or as actually fun than to go get in an airplane and take somebody who is maybe gravely ill and shepherd them to a safe destination and see them go in that hospital, and then see them come out later, or hear that they came out and did really, really well. Do you guys hear back from people out there that say, Sky King, you were there for me?
We absolutely do. That's one of the very rewarding parts that Katie was mentioning. It's the fact that we do keep track of these folks, and a lot of times we'll see them right after a chemotherapy treatment, and that's when they really appreciate it, because they don't have to deal with the lines in the airport, and they get home really quickly, and all the aspects that go associated with private aviation. But we do certainly keep track of the folks and receive letters and pictures and of not only them, but also we have the animal component where we keep track of animals as well to try and help fill that aspect.
Well, currently, about how many flights do you guys say in a given month, or you pick the time period? Is there a busier time of year, and when is that, and how many flights are we talking about here?
Sure. Well, it's very cyclical, as you could imagine.
Right.
The busiest time for us is typically the spring and the early fall. We have dead periods when school starts, Christmas time, and then obviously around New Year's. So from an operational perspective, we take that opportunity to refurbish our planes or take them down for maintenance. So
Absolutely.
We have obviously 17 years of experience at this, so we're pretty good at it now. So we have a good idea of that. But to answer your other question, over the 17 years, and I think this is probably the most impactful number, is that we've carried 1,870 passengers.
Wow.
So, and that doesn't include obviously animals and veterans and some of the other aspects. This is just the patients from rural areas.
Oh, that's a whole other story about the animals and the veterans,
Right.
and we
Definitely.
absolutely appreciate that.
So, Stephen, tell us, how can our viewers learn more about the Sky King Foundation?
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, we're kind of going through a rebranding, so our website is not as operational as we'd like it, but they can certainly visit our Facebook page, or as with all nonprofits, I would strongly encourage them to go to a nonprofit clearinghouse like GuideStar that gives them information about how we use their funds as stewards of their money, and some more background information on the actual organizations themselves.
Okay.
So again, people can find out about you on your Facebook, and they would go to the Sky King Foundation and just look at it. I've seen it. It's a very nice Facebook. That you definitely want to go out there and like it, and you can see the phone number up there. So we hope that our viewers will definitely take advantage of that. It's been a real pleasure to have you here with us today, Stephen. We hope we can get you back.
Well, thanks, Katie. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Well, that wraps up our show for today. Thanks to our special guests, Pamela Sybert and Stephen Birch, for sharing their incredible stories with us. We hope you join us back next week for our Comforts of the Home show, featuring bedding from Peacock Alley and a look at Hope House International.